Alex Pereira is one of the most dangerous men in human history. I honestly think there's only a couple of people that are capable of beating him in a fight. He just knocked out Jiri Prochazka and made it look easier than it looked last time. I mean, the last fight that they had was relatively competitive. It was competitive. This wasn't. Pereira dog-walked Jiri Prochazka. Like, absolutely dog-walked him and knocked him out badly. And I'm going to give my recap of the entirety of UFC 303, which was a pretty mediocre main card. Lots of controversy with a couple of these fights. Garry, MVP. Diego Lopes has Dan Ige stepping in the last couple of hours before the fight. Brian Ortega pulled out. The crowd sucked, by the way. The crowd had no energy. But let's get into this. The timestamps are in the description if you want to hear my take on a particular one of these fights. But it's time for us to give our recap. Listen. Alex Pereira, we're going to talk about like where he is on the GOAT list because he is honestly skyrocketing to the top of the GOAT list. And I was saying, even though it would be fun to see Jiri win because Jiri is one of my favorite fighters and it really sucked to see him get knocked out. I mean, he was so locked in this week. He was even more locked in the stare down tonight than he was in their initial legendary stare down. Jiri just had like such a pure mindset. I know he was talking about the purity and no magic. Dude, it sucks seeing someone that invests their heart and soul into every single breath and every single movement. And Jiri Prochazka just got brutally flatline KO'd. And he looked so devastated. It just sucked to see Jiri get put out like that. Even though I'm an Alex fan. But I was also saying that I wasn't ready to see the end of Poaton's legendary reign. And this guy has done so much in such a short amount of time. I mean, a couple of years ago, he wasn't even in the UFC. And you've got Dana White. I mean, I'm going to post my rant about Dana White that I did on my live stream. You've got Dana White saying Jon Jones is the pound-for-pound #1 fighter? Are you fucking kidding me? Jon Jones is 1-1 since 2020, son. 1-1. He lost to Dominic Reyes. And he beat Cyril Gane. Who beat who? Exactly? Ngannou, fair enough. It's a good win. I think he should have won against Ngannou. He took Volkov to a decision, though. Aspinall fucking blitzkrieged Volkov. Okay, so he's 1-1 since 2020. He's fought twice. Alex Pereira got into the UFC 2 years ago, has beaten 5 champions, has won 2 belts in 2 different weight classes, and has now defended the second belt twice, and has literally defended it twice and won a title. 3 title wins in the last, 8 months? And Dana White has the fucking nerve to talk about how, wait, yeah, Pereira did great, but let's really talk about Jones. If you don't think Jones is the best pound-for-pound fighter on the planet right now, you're an uneducated adult. Shut the heck up, man. Come on, what are we doing? There are plenty of fighters actively that are doing more than Jon Jones right now. Alex Pereira is one of them. He should at least be number 2. He should be number 2 on the pound-for-pound list behind Makhachev. They're basically neck and neck. I know Leon Edwards been doing some good work, but guess what? Taking Colby to a lackluster decision, having a close fight with Usman the first time and KOing him, fair enough, the second one was great, but Pereira's been knocking people out left and right. He's getting better with every single one of his performances. It's fucking insane. This guy's not just beating people, he's like improving fight to fight in his late 30s. He looked better in this fight than the first one against Jiri. The first one against Jiri was winning. And that's why people were picking him to win this. It was tempting to pick Jiri to win this because he was doing well in the first fight. And the stoppage was early, and therefore was anticlimactic. This performance, he got schooled. It was extremely decisive, extremely conclusive as well. He got dropped badly twice. The first knockdown, Jiri looked like a geriatric. I mean, the round was over, the bell had rung. Jiri was beckoning Alex Pereira to jump on him. Jiri was in that survival mode. And then he gets brutally knocked out the second round starts. And it wasn't just he got hit with another punch. The first punch dropped him. No, he got like set up with a perfectly timed, nasty Poaton head kick. Lead leg head kick because those calf kicks were conditioning him to think low. And that's the thing about Alex Pereira. He is getting bigger every single fight at light heavyweight. He looks way bigger in the cage than he did when he fought Jan Blachowicz and Jiri Prochazka back in the day, right? And he's fighting more confidently. And I think that's probably because he's been taken down by Jiri. In that first fight, nothing happened. He got taken down by Jan Blachowicz. Nothing happened. Like, he got put in some bad positions, but he survived. And I think what's happening with Alex Pereira is the longer that he's been in MMA, the more experience he's had, even grappling in bad positions on the ground in the UFC, like in high-level fights. And the more times he's been able to survive those positions, the more confident he's getting in his fights to confidently go after people without fearing the consequences of getting taken down. Whereas there was always some sort of an unknown of what if I get taken down by Jiri and this guy could show me levels and beat my ass on the ground. First off, Alex Pereira stuffed Yuri's takedown in the first round, but he's not fighting with a fear of a takedown anymore. He's straight up just hunting these guys, and he's being more aggressive, and I think that he's trusting in his chin more. So not only does he trust more in his ground game and his ability to survive, but he's no longer skittish on the feet, worried about getting touched with one punch and being sent to the netherworld, you know, like he was against Adesanya. So Alex Pereira is getting better fight to fight. He is getting bigger, like he's filling into his frame at 205 more. Pereira is enormous for 205. I was even saying to my live stream, Jiri Prochazka looked way bigger in this fight. Like, just more mass. When he fought Alex last time, he was closer to the point in which he injured his shoulder. And so that's less time doing strength and conditioning work. That's less time recovering from a nasty shoulder injury. Since then, Jiri Prochazka's had just under a year to improve in strength and conditioning, to build up the lost muscle tissue that he had been losing when he had to take that time off. Jiri Prochazka looked way bigger, and so did Pereira. Pereira was still dwarfing him in the cage. This dude was like 230 pounds last night. I'm guessing he weighed close to 240 in the cage tonight. He could easily move up to heavyweight. Easily. Okay, I don't want to fucking hear it. Like, Dana White's sitting here telling us about the dangers of the heavyweight division. Heavyweight's a different beast. As if these guys aren't all plotty fat oafs. They're all big fat refrigerators. There's like two of them that actually know how to fight. There's like two of them that are light on their feet. Gone. And who else? Tom Aspinall? He ain't fighting John Jones because Jones ain't going to welcome any new challenges other than old man Stipe. So we may as well not even talk about him. But the only two challenges at heavyweight are gone. And who else? Again, Tom Aspinall. Maybe Jolton Almeida, but he's not even relevant at this point. Not Curtis Blades. I don't want to fucking hear about Curtis Blades, dude. We saw a divisional skill gap on display today between middleweight and light heavyweight with Roman Dolidze and Anthony Smith. There is a massive divisional skill gap between light heavyweight and heavyweight, okay? Curtis Blades' grappling on the ground is about just as good as Jan Blachowicz. It's only just more hyped because he's able to take down fat people, and I don't know, I guess he can control them a little bit more easily, whereas Blachowicz is fighting people that are more evenly matched. But the point that I'm making is, if Alex Pereira can survive on the ground with Jan Blachowicz, he can survive on the ground against any heavyweight, and they would have a much harder time taking him down with his light heavyweight takedown defense skill and his light heavyweight striking skill, which he would use to dog walk basically all heavyweights. Okay, I don't want to talk about the whole, oh, heavyweights are big, nasty hitters. No, these guys fucking suck compared to Alex Pereira. And let's get serious about this. Alex Pereira would send Cyril Gane and his head into orbit. Cyril Gane's the type of guy that needs 40 front kicks, 50 leg kicks, 30 solid jabs, and 20 step-in knees to even start to chip away at you and get close to a finishing sequence. Okay? He's able to do that against fat, stuck-in-the-mud heavyweights. There is no fucking way that Pillow Hands Gane has anything for Alex Pereira. I know he styles on Sergey Spivak. You've got Jiri Prochazka getting sunned by Alex Pereira. You have Jamal Hill getting schooled by Alex Pereira. Jan Blachowicz, I mean, how good is his chin? He didn't get KO'd by Pereira, but even Jan Blachowicz is getting outstruck. Gane's getting slept, cold, flatlined. And guess what? Not only does Gane get flatlined, the talk about Aspinall running through Alex Pereira, I think it's possible. I think that Aspinall does have high-level grappling, even for a heavyweight. But if he doesn't take down Pereira, I know Aspinall has a big clubbing right hand. The big clubbing right hand is going to work on Sergey fucking Pavlovich, who's a big fat refrigerator oaf. Okay? Yeah, the big clubbing right hand works on tall, slow Volkov, who schooled Sergey Pavlovich, but, Sergey's a refrigerator. Listen, a clubbing right hand, I could see Alex Pereira potentially evading it, okay? If he doesn't get hit by a clubbing right hand, he wins the striking battle. And the point that I'm making here is Aspinall is someone that will risk a striking war or a striking battle. Like, Aspinall doesn't strike me as the guy that's always going to take the path of least resistance as soon as a fight starts. He could maybe easily beat Alex Pereira by submission. There's a real chance he tries to strike with him. When we were talking about Aspinall versus Sergey Pavlovich, we were saying, Aspinall might want to strike with him, and that might be real risky, and he did strike with him. It was real risky. He did get clipped with a big hook. Imagine if it was Pereira's left hook. Pereira's going to be a lot better at setting it up, by the way. And also, he's going to be offering other things to Aspinall, so it's going to be closer every time. But my point is, he struck with Sergey Pavlovich. Aspinall is the type of fighter to engage in the striking when he has an easier path to victory at times, because he has one hit or quitter power. He could knock you out with one punch, but he's doing it to fat heavyweights. And yes, he could knock out anyone on this planet. And yes, he's like one of the most dangerous humans to ever walk the earth. But Alex Pereira is like 240 pounds in the light heavyweight cage. If he bulked up a little bit, he's going to be 260 in the cage at heavyweight. He's going to be 255. That's more than enough weight to knock Tom Aspinall dead in the octagon. And if Aspinall strikes with him, as I said, if he doesn't shoot for the takedown early, I'm favoring Payton in that fight. Again, it's easy to look at Aspinall, one shot, big clubbing shot against a fat guy. That ain't gonna be so easy to land on Pereira that's chipping away at the calf. I'm telling you right now, that is a winnable fight for Alex Pereira. And if he beats someone like Tom Aspinall, he's a top 5 fighter of all time. I don't know if he does. I might pick Tom Aspinall to win that fight, but it's a real conversation. You can't just sit here and tell me, no, don't be stupid. He ain't gonna win. He's not just a middleweight that's moved up to light heavyweight anymore. Dude, Alex Pereira is an enormous light heavyweight. He's probably the biggest light heavyweight outside of Alexander Rakic. He's a legit 205er with middleweight skill, one of the best kickboxers of all time. You bet this guy has a chance to knock out anyone at heavyweight. The UFC, I know Dana White's glazing Jon Jones. Jones must have some dirt on him, but they're only going to have Alex Pereira for a couple more years, okay? They have to recognize the talent that they have. They have to recognize how good this guy is, how he's been saving events, right? He could be the face of the UFC. He has the style. He has the aura. He has the support from the hardcore fans. He's going to be active too. They should be promoting this guy like never before. They should be making a fucking movie on this guy. And also Magomed Ankalaev, let's talk about that. Dude, I would like to see that fight. That's the last and only other guy that he should fight at 205. I think he beats him. The way that Magomed beats Alex Pereira is by knocking him out on the feet, because he has good power and he's pretty technical on the feet, or by beating him by decision. He's not submitting him, and he's not ground and pound TKOing him. I'm done with the whole Alex Pereira is easily finishable on the ground. That's not the case, okay? Especially not with Magomed Ankalaev, who hasn't finished a fly other than Anthony Smith on the ground, and that's Anthony Smith. And also, it was one of those Anthony Smith pity TKOs, where Smith was sort of feeling bad for himself because he was injured and sort of got demoralized on the feet. And then it was like a referee was sort of feeling bad for him. No, let's not save Anthony Smith. It was one of those things. It wasn't like a nasty TKO where Smith was out cold. It wasn't a submission. Magomed isn't the dominant grappler than a lot of people think he is. He's just not. He's more of a striker than a grappler. He has the ability to mix it up. He has a good ability to control people. And he has decent takedowns. At this point, I've seen enough from Alex Pereira to at least let me know that he's not going to get finished on the ground. And he's not just going to get his ass whooped on the ground, that he could at least survive. On the feet, I don't think Alex Pereira is going to respect the ground game that much of Magomed Ankalaev to the point to where he's going to be low output. On the feet, Pereira is going to be confident, coming off of 3 KOs. Magomed Ankalaev, think about the mindset that he's going to have going into a fight with a guy like Alex Pereira, who's just knocked out Jiri twice, Jamal Hill, and outstruck Jan Blachowicz. Like, how terrifying it's going to be for him to strike with Alex Pereira, knowing that if he makes one mistake, One mistake, he's going to get sent to the Shadow Realm. Let's talk about where Alex is on the all-time list, by the way. I think Alex Pereira has done enough to be considered a top 10 fighter of all time. Or at least right outside of the top 10. And I'm talking about 11, 12. I don't know who he's passed up, but beating Jiri Prochazka twice, beating Jamal Hill, Adesanya, Sean Strickland, Jan Blachowicz, doesn't matter if the Jan fight was for a title or not, that's still an amazing win. Beating all of those guys, that's a lot of quality. I mean, one loss and that's it. That's a great ratio of wins to losses. Again, I think that this has to mean that he's at least close to the top 10, maybe right outside of it. Okay, one more win against a guy like Magomed Ankalaev. That'd be 2 belts, 2 weight classes, clearing out the second division, defending multiple times in the second division, beating a really respectable guy like Magomed. You would have to put him in the top 10, but he's no lower than like the number 12, 13 spot. No lower than that. I don't think this win catapulted him up that much just because he already beat Jiri. You know what I mean? So it's not like you're beating Max Holloway 3 times or whatever. But my point is he already beat Jiri. Jiri's a great win to have, but you know, he's not like a GOAT or whatever. So I think that Alex Pereira moves up maybe 1 or 2 spots. One more win against Magomed, a new matchup, supposedly more difficult stylistically. I think that puts him close to the top 5. And if he beats Tom Aspinall, if he doesn't even fight Magomed next or just beats Tom Aspinall and that's his next fight, he's top 5. 3 belts, 3 different weight classes against a high-level heavyweight, maybe the best heavyweight we've ever seen. Skill-wise, yeah, I think it's safe to say that he would be a top 5 fighter. And if he gets Magomed out of there and Aspinall, you could consider him the GOAT. So on to the next fight, Diego Lopes versus Dan Ige. Shout out to Dan Ige for saving the day. I didn't know he was fighting tonight until a couple of hours before his actual fight. And the commentary team, or I should say the broadcast on ESPN, didn't even mention it until the main card. I think that was a crafty tactic to be able to get as many people as possible to buy the pay-per-view before breaking the news that Brian Ortega, the 3rd biggest star on the card, had pulled out. And that sucks that Ortega pulled out. He's definitely a more interesting fighter than Dan Ige, but dude, you got to give Dan Ige some credit for saving this fight, because if he didn't step in, we wouldn't have had Diego Lopes fight tonight. And Diego Lopes won tonight, and I actually think it was a really good win. I know some people are calling it a fraud check. I don't like that at all, and I'll talk about that in a bit. But I do want to rant about the crowd a little bit, because the crowd sucked, man. The crowd fucking sucked. And this is a perfect example of why. The first round of this fight was epic. It was a little bit boring as it went on, but the first round was epic. These guys were trading. These guys were landing knockout shots on each other. Crazy that Dan Ige ate them so well, but that's not surprising since he didn't have to cut weight. Again, another reason why I think that he did so well in this fight. But my point is, you could tell that the crowd, a lot of them, had only bought tickets to see Conor McGregor because it would be the cool place to be, a McGregor fight. You know, a lot of these people don't even care about MMA. They were just there to see Conor. And when Conor dropped out, they decided to keep their tickets, as a lot of people would. And so I think that we had a lot of casuals in the building that weren't getting hyped for the first round of Diego Lopes versus Ige because they just don't know what's at stake. They don't know who Diego Lopes is. Let's talk about the fight. You got to think of it like this. Yes, Diego Lopes got tired. Yes, Diego Lopes lost the 3rd round. But it's not a moment where you can say, oh, he got exposed and his cardio sucks. No, he just fought someone that was 20 pounds bigger than him that didn't have to cut weight to 145 pounds yesterday. That's not going to have a problem with cardio. That's not going to have a problem with durability because they're not cutting weight like everyone else. And is also way stronger than you in the clinch and in the grappling sequences because, again, they're like walking around at 170. He just had to cruise into 165, whereas Lopes made 146 a night ago. Still had to maintain his weight up until weigh-ins, so he got to 155. And had no idea he was going to be fighting someone like Dan Ige, who literally looked like he was twice the size of Diego Lopes. I know Lopes is taller. Ige looked twice as big, nonetheless. It looked like a small welterweight fighting a featherweight out there. Credit to Dan Ige, because you could just say, well, Dan Ige didn't know he was fighting until tonight. Yeah, but Dan Ige was ready for a fight. Like, he was been preparing for a fight. He was 2 weeks out, and that's the best place to be in your training camp. That's sort of where you peak before you start to drop down in weight. That's before you start to really focus on the weight cut and the training is really good and you still have some good energy. Dan Ige was basically in a perfect spot, perfect condition to be able to outlast Diego Lopes, to be able to eat the big punches of Diego Lopes without getting rocked. Again, he didn't have to cut weight. Lopes did. That was evident in that third round. And so therefore, I don't think Lopes losing the third was that bad of a look on him. The weight cut for him this time must have been worse than it was usually. And people are acting like Lopes still didn't easily win the first and the second. He did. Dan Ige is not just some random bum off the street. Like, Ige's been a staple in the top 15 for the last 4 years. And he's been getting better. He's been getting better throughout the past couple of years. It's a real respectable win. He outstruck Ige in the first. I know Ige wasn't supposed to fight till next week or 2 weeks from now, but he was ready. He was in his training camp. He was game. I think that it's not like just some write-off win. Yeah, but he only beat him coming off the couch. Like, Ige was ready. He was 20 pounds bigger, so therefore it's fucking fair. All right? It was a good fight. Ige did his thing. He beat up Diego Lopes in the third, but got easily out-grappled in the second. And Lopes took the fight to him in the first. Landed some great knees up the middle, great knees to the face, great hooks, strong leg kicks. Ige did his thing too. Landed a lot of big shots in the first round as well. The crowd had no energy whatsoever, which was kind of weird. But I actually think it was a good win. I think it was a respectable win. It's not just like Ige was some out-of-shape fat guy. You know what I mean? He was in great shape. I don't think this was a fraud check or an unfortunate fight for Diego Lopes. Good fight from both of them. They both fought hard. But I think it's a good win for Diego Lopes to have. You know what I mean? Both of these guys weren't really prepared for the specific opponent that they fought tonight. They both had their advantages tonight. I think that, Lopes' advantage was the fact that he knew he was going to be fighting on this date for the last 2 weeks. And, of course, his disadvantage was the fact that he cut weight. Anthony Smith versus Roman Dolidze. Anthony Smith. You know, I'm kind of impressed at how bad he looked, honestly. Like, it actually is kind of impressive. I picked him to win this fight against Roman Dolidze. And I was saying, Roman Dolidze's going to have the grappling advantage because he's a great grappler at middleweight, one of the best middleweight grapplers. He's not a good striker, but I actually think he'll be able to use that middleweight striking that's bummy-ish. He's got, like, bummy middleweight striking. And at least make it look decent at light heavyweight against a guy like Anthony Smith. But Anthony's still crafty. He's a crafty vet. He's got all that experience. He's going to find a way to get it done. Anthony Smith, the guy that's always talking about the fire. You could say you're better here. You could say you're better there on paper. Nobody beats me in the fire. Where was it? Anthony Smith always talks about himself like he's the king of going to war and bringing fire. And he goes out there with like some pitter-pat outside foot battle approach, parrying punches approach, and just fights like an NPC. And even when he's letting his hands go, this was the slowest he's ever looked. Roman Dolidze, the guy that got outstruck by Marvin Vettori, outpointed by Vettori, outskilled by Vettori on the feet, a guy that's always clowned for being mid, made Anthony Smith look mid. And Anthony Smith always looks mid. He made Anthony Smith look like dog shit. Roman Dolidze, really smart approach, by the way. First round was chopping at the legs of Anthony Smith. So that just goes to show that he does have a fight IQ, unlike a lot of Anthony Smith's previous opponents. Just goes to show that there are divisional skill gaps. Ryan Spann. Who else has Anthony Smith fought recently? Even Khalil Roundtree wasn't kicking his legs. And of course, Vitor Petrino, even though that fight was short. Vitor Petrino threw one leg kick. Roman Dolidze probably threw 20 leg kicks in the first round. So very smart approach from him early on. And he was also just outboxing Anthony Smith and throwing spinning attacks. And he was clipping him with spinning back fists and shit like that. Roman Dolidze, the bummiest striker at middleweight, actually outstruck Anthony Smith cleanly. And Anthony Smith is the guy that always talks about his skill set as being, very clean. He's got that technicality, and yeah, he'll maybe lack out on a couple of athleticism points, but when it comes down to the fire, and when it comes down to the outside foot battle, I'm the most technical that there is. He was getting outstruck by Roman Dolidze, dude. And then Roman Dolidze took him down. I don't know what the cope is going to be this time from Smith. Maybe it's going to be about the fact that, Roman didn't really engage in the jiu-jitsu. That might be it. He didn't really engage. He was just kind of hovering over me, but he controlled Anthony Smith on the ground. See, that's not the surprising part for me. I always knew Anthony Smith was not as good of a grappler as Roman Dolidze. Like, Smith is the type of guy to get a submission over Gustafsson in like an ugly fight. Roman Dolidze styles on Jack Hermanson on the ground. Not on the feet, he got outstruck, but on the ground. Like, he is able to take Jack Hermanson and brutalize him. And Hermanson's got really respected jiu-jitsu. Dolidze's a nightmare on the ground for everyone. So credit to Anthony Smith for fucking surviving, but he still got out-grappled. And in the third round, I'll give Smith some respect. He turned up the heat. He definitely turned up the heat a little bit. I was saying, hey, man, you're losing this fight. You may as well live up to the Lionheart name. And he kind of put his foot on the gas and went for it a little bit. I think his legs were too chopped up at that point. Roman Dolidze brought the axe and chopped those legs down like a paper mache, whatever the fuck people call them. Anthony Smith got chopped down. And this was probably the worst he's ever looked. I think Roman Dolidze should stay at light heavyweight. I mean, Smith is beating Ryan Spann and Vitor Petrino. Before Anthony Smith beat Vitor Petrino, even now, most of us would be like, oh, Vitor Petrino's better than Roman Dolidze. But no, divisional skill gap. I should have picked Roman Dolidze, man. It's just that, like, it's kind of crazy. This just proves the divisional skill gap. The most bummy striker at middleweight easily outstrikes Anthony Smith, who's like a staple in the top 10 at light heavyweight. So I think Roman Dolidze should move up, because even if he can't outstrike people that are better than Anthony Smith, like a Khalil Roundtree, it's still going to be somewhat competitive, and he could easily outgrapple him and take him down. Sure, he can't like blitzkrieg Anthony Smith on the ground and run through him, but he might be able to run through Khalil Roundtree on the ground. And my point is, he has options. He has the grappling. And it's going to be hard to take down a guy like a Mavov, but maybe not so hard to take down a one-dimensional striker like Khalil, right? So I actually think Roman should move up, because he's never going to get into the top 5 at middleweight. He got sunned by a Mavov, and a Mavov's good. He's a really good fighter. But he also got beat by Vettori Dolidze. So I think that middleweight is too stacked. There are too many great fighters. Light heavyweight's one of those divisions where you get a couple wins in the top 10, you're fighting for a belt. Move up. Even if he doesn't fight for a belt ever, he'll at least be a staple in the top 10 for a long time, and he'll have big fights. Whereas it's easier to get lost in the mix of things at 185, especially with all the new talent that's coming up. With guys outside the rankings like Kopylov and Joel Sodium. We're going to talk about Pyfer. I think he actually might be ranked, but maybe not. Goodness, I forgot Pyfer flatlined someone tonight with some extra salt. But Anthony Smith, I feel bad for him. Because, he was going to go in there and fight Olberg, and man, he was probably going to get lit up by Carlos Olberg. But, I mean, he just didn't look good. This was the worst version of Smith I've ever seen. I know it was a short notice fight, but, I mean, Smith's known about the state for like 4 months. Not 4 months, but like longer than Ortega. Smith found out about this fight at least a week and a half before the Ortega and Diego Lopes fight was put together. So he's been knowing about this for like 3.5 weeks. He still looked terrible. He looks so slow, dude. Man, this sucks, dude. Anthony Smith. Oh my gosh, man. Anthony Smith. This guy's always talking about him. He's the fucking most technical fighter on the planet. He's getting easily outstruck by Roman the Oaf Dolidze. I think, this is one of those fights where you may have to fucking retire, dude. Like, this is so bad. This is a terrible look. Nah, Smith can't go out like that. This is how Smith's career goes. Yo, imagine if Smith knocked him out in the third round and called out Alex Pereira, and then Pereira had the performance that he had against Jiri. But Smith lost, and we'll never see that fight. I think Smith should call out. Who can he even call out? I don't know. Maybe fight Shamil the Blob Ghazi or something like that. Move up to heavyweight, become a blob. Smith should become a blob. Either become a blob and fight Shamil the Blob Gaziev, or or I'm struggling to keep it together. Or move to Smith is kind of fat, a little bit fat at 205. Maybe move to like 170 and fight MVP. Fight MVP at 170. That's what we need. Okay, that's what we need. Either fight MVP or fight Shamil the Blob Gaziev. Dude, it's actually sad that he lost, though. I wanted him to win. I picked him to win, too. But I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised. Middleweight, strikers, a little bit slicker, a little bit faster. How good is Marvin Vettori? Marvin Vettori probably would have outstruck Anthony Smith easily. So, yeah, let's get on to the next one. Ian Garry versus MVP. Let's lock in. Let's get serious. Okay, it's time to lock in. My first initial thought on this fight was that it was a robbery. That was my first initial take. Robbery. How could they possibly give this to Ian Garry? He got embarrassed in the second round and easily lost the third. But I think it was more so my shock at how badly Ian Garry looked on the feet and the momentum from the second round and onwards, where the first round was dominant. Ian Garry looked like he was very patient. It wasn't like he was freezing up like a bot. That's what we saw in the second round. Before we sort of got hit with the reality check that Ian Garry was too scared to engage with MVP on the feet, which was surprising to me a little bit because it's not that MVP was the better striker or outstriking him, even though I thought Ian Garry would be able to outstrike him. It's that Ian Garry was like so skittish and afraid to engage. That's what kind of caught me off guard a little bit. Like the respect he had for MVP was 10 times what I thought it would be. And I even thought it would be there, but just not as much as it was. Before we saw that, Garry dominated the first round. It looked like he was about to get a rear naked choke. It looked like he was about to have a I told you moment. Like, you guys thought I was going to lose to this. Like, I'm the real deal. I'm one of the best on earth. I have options. I can submit people. I can beat people up on the feet. I can knock people out. It was about to be a holy shit, this guy actually might be champ one day performance. MVP survives. We haven't seen a lot of rear naked chokes in high-level fights recently, by the way. I've been noticing that. I don't remember the last time we saw a rear naked choke in a high-level fight on a pay-per-view. Maybe remind me, but it seems like people are getting really good at defending these chokes because Garry got close. Okay? And then even in fights like Raul Rosas versus Ricky Tercios, there are so many moments where people have a locked-in rear naked choke and they just don't get it. Things were very close. The second round was the total opposite direction. Dominance for Michael Venom Page. And I was shocked. I mean, Kevin Holland did better than Ian Garry on the feet. And he still got sunned. He still got schooled. But Kevin Holland was doing more offensively to have success on the feet against MVP than Ian Garry. Garry was just standing there frozen like a bot, like a controller that died, waiting for his opportunity to close the distance to get a hold of MVP. No confidence in his striking. I know we talked about this on the post-fight interview, namely that the reason why he wasn't throwing leg kicks, which is one of the things that I expected a lot more of from him, was because he was expecting MVP to counter him with the right hand. And I understand that, but still, listen, I know it's a lot easier said than done. You've got a guy that basically loves to come in and blitz people with a right hand. Maybe some jabs to catch him in his tracks, right? Maybe some front kicks up the middle. All he was throwing was lead head kicks, like the one that Pereira caught Jiri with, but they weren't successful. And that was basically it. Like, he threw a couple of lead head kicks, one body kick. That seemed to be it. Maybe one jab in the second round. Just looked totally out of his depths. Was sweating. His body language didn't look good at all. He was drenched. He looked real nervous. And so there was a huge contrast between the first and the second round, where the first round it was like, damn, this guy might actually be championship material. Second round, it's holy shit. He's getting totally bitched on the feet. He's getting bitch slapped. He's getting caught by MVP. MVP was stunning him. First of all, we got to at least say at this point that Garry actually has a good chin. I know he has a pea head. I know he's a vegan, and he is deteriorating fight to fight physically. Like, you can just see it in his physique. You can see it in his power and speed. He has literally been deteriorating. But Garry, despite being a vegan and despite having a pea head, has taken some big shots from MVP, Jeff Neal. He's not been KO'd yet, so I think the whole he's chinny thing isn't necessarily true. Just because he's gotten caught a couple of times earlier on in his career. But he got sunned in the second round. Dominated, dog walked. So it's 1-1 going into the third. And so I think that because people saw Garry get his comeuppance in the second, and even though MVP got dominated in the first round, getting dominated on the feet when you're a striker like Ian Garry is more of a moral loss for Ian Garry than MVP getting out-grappled, where MVP's always someone that could get out-grappled. So I think right off the bat, mentally, most people are going into that third round watching the fight thinking, man, this is looking bad for Garry. He is going to get totally bitched up again. And initially, I saw MVP winning the third round. He outstrikes Garry, even lands on top of Ian Garry when Garry goes for a takedown, gets like 1 minute and 30 seconds of control. And all Garry seems to do is get 1 minute and 30 seconds of control at the end of the round, but he gets outstruck, and MVP also had the control. So what do you know? MVP wins. I called it a robbery on my initial watch. I actually think it may have been the right decision, and I'll tell you why. And I'm not being biased just because I picked Ian Garry. I did say the grappling would play into this fight, by the way. So I didn't just say Garry would, sun him on the feet and that's it. I did say I think he can outstrike him, and I did choose him to outstrike him, but I also thought the grappling would come into the equation. Just giving myself a little bit of a pat on the back. You know how it is, man. Gotta just prove that I'm not a casual. I brought up the grappling. It did happen. That's what won him the fight. Now I'm just, I gotta cope a little bit. But I did mention that a little bit. Either way, the point that I'm going to make is I actually think if you actually look at this closely, I promise I'm not coping. Ian Garry, and I know it sounds like I'm preaching to the choir if you already think that Ian Garry won. Ian Garry actually was landing strikes on the feet with MVP. When I watched that third round back closely, it was very close. I'm talking MVP was ahead on strikes by like 2. Garry was landing strikes on the feet. MVP was landing strikes, significant strikes, but it wasn't as dominant for MVP as people thought. It wasn't dominant at all. It was extremely close on the feet. Garry was in there landing some strikes. MVP still was landing, maybe a tiny bit more. I'm talking 1 or 2 max. But I think the fact that MVP dominated the second made people just sort of think that he's dominating the third on the feet no matter what's happening. But it was actually extremely close. Then we got to talk about the grappling. So maybe the striking alone, MVP wins. Striking alone, on a couple strikes, the grappling. MVP's grappling control time, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Same amount as Ian Garry's. Both were 1 minute and 30 seconds. MVP in full guard. Ian Garry is elbowing him in the face. And you got to be consistent with this stuff. We count damage. Yes, MVP is holding down Ian Garry, but Ian Garry is landing elbows off of his back. And they're not the most powerful, but they are decent. They're not just pipsqueak shots. They're decent elbows off of his back. MVP wasn't landing anything. He may have landed 1 pit-pat shot. That's it. So even though MVP had control time, Garry was landing strikes. So you have to give him points based on that. And then Garry takes MVP's back at the end of the round, has the same control time as MVP, and strikes landed of his own. I think he landed like 10 plus strikes on the ground. That's something. So overall, even when MVP was controlling Ian Garry, Garry was landing some strikes in those exchanges. And so it's kind of even in a way. And then when MVP got controlled, he was getting hit. So Garry was doing a lot more with his control time. And the striking exchanges on the feet were extremely close. If you gave this fight to MVP, I think that's fine. Like, I don't think it would be a robbery. But I also don't think it was a robbery by going to Ian Garry. I actually think it was a good decision. And just because he gets outstruck by MVP, who's, at this point, I mean, it's clear as day. I'm never going to doubt him on the feet again. I just don't think anyone's going to outstrike this guy. You got to be Wonder Boy, and even that, I don't even know if Wonder Boy could outstrike him. I guess that just goes to show that Garry isn't as good as I thought on the feet. But hey, we know he can offensively grapple. We just saw it for the first time in the UFC, the first time we've seen him really use it in the UFC. So he did look good on the ground, better than Kevin Holland. So there's that. I think he should fight the loser of Leon Edwards and Belal Muhammad. And I think that Shavkat or JDM should fight the winner of Edwards and Belal Muhammad. And if Garry beats the loser of Edwards and Belal Muhammad. He should fight for a title. Usman, I know people are talking about Usman fighting Shavkat. I think that's dumb. I don't want Usman to fight Shavkat. It would make sense rankings-wise. Usman deserves a fight like that, but why would he want it? He probably loses, and if he wins, congrats, you get to fight Leon again. No one wants to see that shit, and you'll probably lose too. I just don't think Usman should be in the conversation at welterweight. He deserves to be, but I don't think he should put himself in that position because welterweight's just a weight cut and a tough fight. Why not move up to middleweight? Let Garry fight the loser of Belal and Leon, and let Shavkat and JDM fight for the belt next, okay? One of the two. Maybe we could see Ian Garry versus JDM. I don't know who would win that. I honestly think that JDM could win that, but boring fight, but an interesting one to recap because it was very close, and I do think that Ian Garry's striking looked pathetic. I mean, really, he looked scared shitless on the feet, and I was kind of surprised to see him that gun-shy. Let's get on to the next one. Joe Pyfer versus Marc-Andre Barriault. Nasty KO. There's not a whole lot to recap. I think that Marc-Andre Barriault or someone on his team may have asked Joe Pyfer to cover their shift at the salt mine, and you don't do that. You don't ask him to cover your shift at the salt mine, but all jokes aside, that combination from Joe Pyfer was nasty. It wasn't even like the punch that flatlined Marc-Andre Barriault and had him snoring on the canvas was like a mean punch. It was one of those, yeah, I've got you out of here, but I really want to put you out cold. Pyfer hurt Marc-Andre Barriault, and I expected him to get this win in the first round by KO because Barriault just waltzes forward and doesn't have the best defense and will just go to a 3-round slugfest in the pocket, but he doesn't have power. So clearly he's just walking into the heaviest hitting middleweight that there is, basically, with a whole lot of grit in each punch. Always a bad idea if you're in front of Joe Pyfer walking forward and that's your style. And Joe Pyfer just wailed on him up against the fence. Wasn't even catching him that clean. Was catching him like through the guard, on the top of the head, with grazing shots, but just putting everything into them. Even ripped to the body once, which was really good. And Marc-Andre Barriault just got knocked down with thud. Just pure 100% thud. And that final shot was, the ref was about to step in anyway because of the overwhelming flurry. But Pyfer decided to really freaking grit down and go after that last one to make sure that he put Marc-Andre Barriault out cold. And he did. Caught him with a nasty uppercut. Tons of power. One of those TKOs where, again, not anything really landed that clean until the uppercut. But just the fact that whatever he was landing, even if it was at the top of the head, the worst place you could hit someone, not the worst place, but I should say, the place where you hit people where they don't normally fall. He was hitting Barriault there and getting him to fall. You know what I mean? That's just pure power and rage from Joe Pyfer. The finish and the performance that he needed, that's the type of dominance you want to see against a step back in competition. I think we should do Joe Pyfer. He's calling out Paul Craig, which is a weak call out. I know that he doesn't like Paul Craig. Pyfer usually says that he doesn't like the fact that Paul Craig will get in people's faces and have like a super intense stare down just to roll around on his back like a fool. So I understand that. Maybe Paul Craig has talked some shit against Joe Pyfer as well. So there's some beef there maybe, but I just think it's too easy. I mean, that'd be more easy than a Marc-Andre Barriault fight. Paul Craig is a pipsqueak on the feet, and Pyfer's got good takedown defense. So I want to see Pyfer fight someone more dangerous. But let's get on to the next one. Swanson versus Fili. Fili won the first round. Swanson won the second. And I think Swanson landed the better shots in the third. I think it was a very close fight, but they gave it to Fili. Not a whole lot to say about it, to be honest. But, I don't think it was that horrible of a scorecard. I did pick Andre Fili to get this done, but he was backing up on his bike in the second and third round in front of Cub Swanson, and Cub Swanson's 41 years old. It just goes to show that Andre Fili, I think he's like 32, 33. He might be in his prime, but he's never going to get that far. If you're losing to a 41-year-old, getting backed up, letting Cub Swanson impose his will, that's not the best look. So, Fili won, but it arguably could have went to Cub Swanson. Let's get on to the next one. Jourdain versus Silva. Gene Silva knocks Jourdain out with a nasty uppercut on the break of a clinch exchange in the second round. Jourdain was lighting up Gene Silva early, and then Gene Silva kind of figured out that, you know what, you don't have any power. I know you can style on people and you can beat people with high output decisions, but you can also get knocked the fuck out. And that's the thing. Jourdain has never been put out, which goes to show the sort of power that Gene Silva has. Jourdain's never been knocked out in the UFC. Gene Silva was the first guy to knock him out. One punch, nasty uppercut, which is really impressive. But again, Jourdain's one of these guys that overwhelms people with volume and beats them via kickboxing, tit-tat decisions, right? And he is entertaining. He can be violent, but he's not a KO guy, and he doesn't pose a threat of a KO. And I think that Gene Silva, after a while, he started sort of emoting on Jourdain and styling on him at the end of the first round, just sort of understood that there's not a whole lot of power coming back in my direction. I'm going to just walk this guy down with no respect. And we saw that happen. We saw him land some bombs on Jourdain at the end of the first round, and he gets it done in the second. One of the most entertaining fighters at featherweight. And we used to say that featherweight lacked knockout punchers, but that's not the case anymore. We're starting to see a ton of knockout punchers at featherweight. Josh Emmett's always been in the mix, but now we have Topuria. Holloway's been KOing more people as well. Ige, I know we didn't get a KO tonight, but he's been knocking people the fuck out. Diego Lopes has potential to be knocking people the fuck out every single time he fights. And now Gene Silva. So I'm liking featherweight. I'm liking the more powerful featherweight roster compared to the one that we used to have, the more decision-friendly featherweight roster. The real O'Malley has a real Eddie Wineland KO. This was the real Eddie Wineland KO. Didn't take him a couple minutes. It took him 10 seconds to knock out Gamori. I want Payton Talbott to fight one of the Basharat brothers. Okay? Because Gamori's not a known guy. He went to a decision with William Gomez. So he's not a total scrub if he went to a decision with William Gomez. Actually, William Gomez finished him in the third round, but he was at least in there with Gomez for a while. Payton Talbott effortlessly knocked him out in 10 seconds. This was one of those fights where even Talbott looked shocked at his performance. Like, even he looked really shocked that he had made it look so easy. We did our usual thing. We rushed to the UFC's Instagram to call him the real O'Malley. And, you know, let me sort of fill you in on what we mean by the real O'Malley. O'Malley cares about becoming a star. O'Malley loves the fact that, you know, he's growing as a star status. Payton Talbott honestly doesn't give a fuck. And that's why Payton Talbott is the real O'Malley. O'Malley's fighting, he's wide-eyed. He doesn't want to get KO'd. Payton Talbott doesn't care if he wins or loses. He's chilling, he's walking people down, sitting on his shots, taking punishment, taking damage. He has the same entertaining style, not the same style, but the same sort of highlight reel-worthy style without being wide-eyed and caring about getting KO'd. You know what I mean? And I think that he would knock out O'Malley too. I don't think he would knock O'Malley out, but I just love building a rivalry between him and O'Malley because, like, they're just going to build Payton Talbott the same way they built O'Malley. And I think because Payton Talbott isn't going to try as hard and he isn't going to be like this wide-eyed guy on the back foot, I think he's going to have even better performances. Like, even if he doesn't KO people stiff in one round, he's going to have wars with people. You know what I mean? And the sport is bigger than it was when O'Malley was first coming up. So, like, in general, he'll have more fans. And I think O'Malley's not going to like it. So I kind of like the fact that there's going to be a beef building between these guys. But let me just say this. Listen, there are some people that are pumping the brakes on Payton Talbott. And I think that what they're trying to do is, these are the people that are saying things like, dude, stop being hyped. He knocked out a can. Hardcore fans, of course, right? Hardcore fans. These are the people that would be hyped up if Gene Silva knocked out Weston Wilson on an Apex prelim fight. These are the people that would be hyping up Vinicius Oliveira for flying kneeing someone on an Apex prelim. They'd be going crazy. They'd be like, Vinicius Oliveira's a monster. He's the real monster. Payton Talbott does it, and Payton Talbott's getting pushed by the UFC. Dude, what are you doing hyping him up, man? He's not a real fighter, bro. He sucks. Put him up against a real fighter. It's just like the typical, let me show how hardcore I am. Let's not get hyped about this guy knocking people out just because the UFC's pushing him doesn't mean he's actually good. Dude, he knocked this dude the fuck out, highlight reeled him, has a sick fighting style. We shouldn't be pumping the brakes. You know what I mean? Corey Sandhagen comes into the UFC. He'll have like 4 decisions in a row, and you won't hear anything but praise from hardcore fans. But Payton Talbott flatlines people, but he gets pushed by the UFC and he has funny hair. You're a casual if you really think he's that good. Stop being so hyped up. I don't want to fucking hear it, dude. We can get hyped up for highlight reel KOs by people that are getting pushed from the UFC, all right? I'm tired of people saying that you're overhyping this dude. He's had perfect performances every fucking time. What is there not to hype up? And I want him to fight the Basharat bros. I want him to fight Javid Basharat specifically, the better Basharat bros. We saw the other one get fraud checked, Farid. I wanted him to fight Javid. Because this is it. The hardcore fans, the real hardcore fans, look at Javid Basharat and they say things like, yeah, but Javid's a monster. He's really the real Loch Ness monster of this division, and he's kind of hiding in the woodworks. Real fans know he's the best. That's what they said about Ricky Simone, by the way. Ricky Simone. Remember when real hardcores were hyping him up? And he's always been all right, but even I overrated him, Ricky Simone, because he was a wrestler. Anyone that wrestles in the bantamweight division and gets hyped up by Chael Sonnen and gets a pat on the back from Chael Sonnen once, hardcore fans are going to have aneurysms about. Javid Basharat, decision merchant, pillow puncher, pipsqueak, has like one finish in his UFC career. Payton Talbott would smoke him. But it is an interesting stylistic matchup to see. Maybe Javid holds him down and elbows him and maybe comes close to a submission. And I just want to see that fight because I think it would get him some respect from the real hardcore fans. Arlovski versus Buday. Martin Buday had an opportunity to earn his freedom tonight. And he is going to the apex. They pulled out the tractor. They pulled out the forklift. And they're bringing Martin Buday to the apex. As I said, he was going to earn his freedom when he fought Shamil the Blob Gaziev. He was on a 4-fight win streak and he lost. This was his opportunity. Andrei Arlovski is a real person. He's been a UFC champion. He's a crafty vet. He's 45 years old. And Martin Buday was offered his freedom. Not even if he had beaten Andrei Arlovski. He was even given the ultimate offer. He was told, if you go out and impose your will and try to knock this old man pillow puncher out, shout out to Arlovski. He's a crafty vet. We all love him. But if you try to knock this old man out, who has got no power, nothing to have you fear anything coming in your direction, all you have to do is try to knock him out. You could even get flatlined and earn your freedom as long as you impose your will. Martin Buday, instead of trying to throw punches with anything on them, got into the clinch with Arlovski and just landed pitter-pat knees and pitter-pat thigh kicks. Or knees to the thigh, I should say. It was the most disgraceful performance I've ever seen. And I picked Martin Buday because he's known for imposing his will and he could push a pace on people and eat them up in the clinch. Dude, I actually think there's an argument that Arlovski won this fight. And it's not even about the decision. First off, I honestly think they should have given this to Arlovski. I actually think he did more. And Arlovski's crafty. You know, he's hard to pin down, but dude, just fucking go for him, man. I'm tired of seeing these 32-year-old heavyweights like get into these little pitter-pat NPC broken controller fights with Andrei Arlovski. He has no power. He's 45. You're a professional heavyweight mixed martial artist. Go after him. You don't even need to finish him. You could lose. You could be the first guy Arlovski KOs in the last 10 years. As long as you try, you'll get some respect. But you're going to like a fucking, knee to the thigh decision against him. What the fuck are you doing? Pathetic. Martin Buday. They had the freaking jet going. They're about to freaking bring Martin Buday to the freaking motherland. And instead, he's going back to the apex. They're going to wheel him out or put him on the conveyor belt and give him the battery pack for a Josh Parisian Part 2 fight. So, very disappointed. Let's go on to the next one. Jourdain versus Hernandez. Good fight. Actually, a really solid grappling fight. Lots of interesting exchanges in this one. Hernandez won the third. I'm kind of impressed that he outgrappled Jourdain. Jourdain reminds me of Tatsudo Taira. He's younger than Tatsudo Taira, both, of course, from Japan. He's 22 years old. But he reminds me of Tatsudo Taira because of his high-level grappling. And he did a really good job of controlling Hernandez, putting him in bad positions. Didn't finish him, didn't get the finish like Tatsudo. Again, he's younger. He doesn't have as much experience, but really solid grappling from him. And Hernandez put up a good fight too. Simone versus Oliveira. This was a close one. I gave Oliveira the first round. I gave Simone the second. And I gave Oliveira the third. Initially, I thought Simone won the third, but then I watched it back. It was an Oliveira round. Pretty clear. Man, Oliveira had a close fight with Sopaj. Someone that took that fight on like a day's notice that hadn't had a UFC fight that wasn't even that great. and he beats Ricky Simón. Ricky Simón might be like the most overrated bantamweight in the last 5 years. As I said earlier, people have talked about Ricky Simón as being like the dark horse of the bantamweight division for years. It stopped after he lost to Mario Batista, but like I can understand losing to Mario Batista, who's on a streak. Losing to Vinicius Oliveira, I mean, people talk about Simón as being this high-level control grappler, one of the best heavy pressure grapplers. You would think he's shooting 100 takedowns like Merab. You would think he has the control of a GSP with the way that they talk about this guy. They talk about him like, dude, no one puts a pace on someone like Ricky Simón. What pace? One overhand and a hook and a leg kick per every 2 minutes, and one blast double leg where they end up getting up to their feet easily. Listen, I like Ricky Simón, but he's overrated as fuck. He's overrated. And I don't even know if he's better than half the bantamweight roster at this point. Maybe he's just always fighting like the better up-and-comers, but dude, I feel like a lot of people beat Ricky Simón now. So this gave me a different perspective on his skill set. Oliveira, entertaining. He sort of reminds me of Payton Talbott too, with the way that he sits down in his shots. I'm talking about like the hands down, super collected. And this is the thing that I like about the style. They invest everything into their strikes, and they're super composed, right? Talbot, Vinicius Oliveira, not necessarily jittery at all. Like they are totally not investing, but committing. They are committing to everything that they throw. There's no hesitancy. They are committing to everything that they throw, taking risk, not worried about taking a little bit of damage. It's incredibly entertaining to watch, and it's always going to produce a fun fight with the potential of us getting a finish. So Oliveira's got a really entertaining style. Second win in the UFC, a great win as well to have against Ricky Simón. So how did I do on picks? I got that one wrong. How many did I get wrong? I got the Jourdain Silva fight wrong. I got the Smith Dolidze fight wrong. And I'll count picking Diego Lopes because I would have picked him against Ige. So let's see. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 and 3? Is that what I went? 10 and 1, 2. 10 and 2. You know, we didn't do so bad. 10 and 2. Pretty good. Pretty good record. So yeah, that was UFC 303. Kind of a lackluster main card up until the last two fights. Alex Pereira saved the day. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments. Until next time.